Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. So glad to keep rolling along on this NFL train with everybody out there. Of course, we have him back. Kevin Midget is back in the house. You know, we're excited to talk about more NFL. Well, they say off season, but the NFL never sleeps, and there's always something to talk about. But I see Kevin is rocking the hat too. You know, this must be the Tommy Shelby Brigade. I don't know if you're a Peaky Blinders fan. Me and my wife watched that show, and you know, how's it going, man? Oh, you're on mute, Kev. Kevin, I can't hear. Go. Yeah, yeah, because I heard him earlier. Yeah. Oh, oh.
How
There
about
you go.
now?
There we go. Hey, we got him. All right.
Are we good? Are we good? You guys got me?
I got you. Go ahead. So you Peaky Blinders
Okay,
fan?
good enough. Nah, actually, no. I heard it's a great show and everything like that. I'm glad to be back on this show, though. I will tell you that much. I had to start wearing my hat frontwards because when I wear it backwards, I started looking like Kevin James. So I had to spin it around a bit. But good to see you guys. Good to be back on this
Yeah,
air.
man. It's funny because my wife and everybody and all her friends say men of a certain age should not wear their hat backwards. You know, like if you're out of college, they say, you know, but we coming up though, everybody wore their hat backwards. You know, it was a whole Ken Griffey thing. Everybody, you know, walked around with their hat backwards and everything, and you know. But now the kids kind of they tilt it to the side and it's flat brim and all that stuff. You know.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, then I can't do that. Yeah. The whole thing is, I wear the hat backwards in the yard when I'm doing yard work, but out in public now, I have to spin it around.
Yeah, I guess you can't go out to a nice restaurant with the family with the hat backwards. You know, I get you know.
No, you're the embarrassing guy at that point.
Right, right. Well, you know, getting back to the NFL, it's crazy, Kevin, because you know you think about the veteran general managers of the past: Ron Wolf, Charlie Casserly, Bill Polian types. You know, these guys were crusty GMs, and they didn't want to help anybody. They wanted to build their roster for about 4 to 5 years and roll with the guys they have. You know, but now we're seeing in the last couple of weeks in this whole offseason that started in March, you know, some big trades. And last week, a big trade that came down, and it's almost like a head scratcher to me, is Stephon Diggs. The Buffalo Bills decide to trade him to the Houston Texans, who are arming up, and we could talk about them. You know, they trade him for a second round pick, a six. That's in 2025, a 2024 sixth round pick, and a 2025 fifth round pick. So little stuff in return, but you know, so often we've seen just teams hold on to people, and we're seeing, you know, maybe it's something to do with these diva type players that they're saying enough's enough, and let's see what we can get by from them. So, what do you think of with this Stephon Diggs trade? And who? I know it's early. Who's the winner in it, though?
As of right now, the winner is the Houston Texans. There's no doubt about it. With C.J. Stroud, the way he played last year, and the receiving core that they have some weapons there. Also, you got to factor in they added Joe Mixon with that as well.
Yeah.
It seems like the Houston Texans are making a push right now. The Buffalo Bills, though, what the hell are they doing? Gabe Davis is gone. Stephon Diggs is gone. They're not that deep at wide receiver, so that tells me they're either making a move on draft day or they're drafting a wide receiver with that first round pick.
Yeah, it's interesting, Kevin, because you were saying that, and you know, I think they're just saying Diggs is not worth the squeeze, you know, of the lemon. You know, too often these receivers, they want the targets, they're a problem, and we saw him kind of going back and forth with Josh Allen leading into the season, kind of yapping back and forth with him about his targets, and you know, I looked at his numbers. Last year he got 160 targets. and had 107 catches. He had some bad drops, as we saw in, I think it was the Kansas City game. He had a really bad drop that could have kind of turned that game around, but he had 107 receptions for 1,183 yards, 8 touchdowns. Great numbers, but he's going to be 31 in November. And in the last 10 games that he played for Buffalo, listen to these numbers. Diggs had 80 targets, but only 422 yards. Conversely, Khalil Shakur, one of those, unspoken guys and unceremoniously, he's a backup on the Bills, but he had 37 targets and he outgained Diggs with 462 yards receiving. That's in our last 10 games. So, I think after Ken Dorsey, they got rid of him. The new offense coordinator kind of was leaning away from Diggs.
Lloyd, the question I have to ask you, though, is you remember, it's probably been like 5-10 years now. It's like running backs are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
No one's taking a running back that high. Are we at the point with wide receivers now, since it's so much offense on the college level, that people are like, you know what, I can get a cheaper wide receiver that's not going to complain as much, and I can pop him in now?
Yeah, that's a great segue, Kevin, because I looked at his salary number too. That Houston's going to they're going to move forward some of his money, $3.5 million this season in guarantees, and he's going to make $22.52 million guaranteed in 2024. So, that's a big number. And then we talk all the time about these quarterbacks and the amount of money that they're making, the upwards of, $45 to $50 million, these star quarterbacks. It's just so tough to pay everybody. And like you said, there's always that pipeline of young talent that's coming from the draft. And it's so pass heavy, even going into high school. I go to a lot of high school games in the fall. It's all pass happy. They're spreading everything out. These kids are going to 7-on-7s. And then in college, they're throwing the ball all over the barn, So, yeah, I think they can find younger, cheaper options, and then also maybe find somebody that can also help out on special teams with these younger guys.
That's exactly it. And I think we're moving in the era now, the diva wide receiver. I mean, I don't know who really started it. Michael Irvin pops into mind, but it's somewhere in that era. Became the me, look at me, And I think we're starting to get away from that now, because it's like, you know what? I got a lot of money in this quarterback. You're bringing him down. So how about I go get somebody cheaper who's going to sit there and just be happy to have the job? I think we're starting to get away from that era now of the diva wide receiver.
Yeah, and then you're also seeing, Kansas City Chiefs back-to-back Super Bowl champion, and they have not had that elite wide receiver. They kind of spread the ball around, and they say, look, we got the best quarterback in the league, and he can make everybody good out there. And I was thinking about that, Kevin. Teams that typically win do not have that big-name receiver because it's just too much. I know in the years that I was around the Eagles and T.O., there were times where they were force-feeding the football to him, and he was getting upset when he wasn't getting his targets, and it was a locker room problem. And I probably say the biggest name that started a lot of this, you think about Chad Ochocinco, back in the day, who was Chad Johnson. He was such a pain in the butt, and they put up big numbers, Pro Bowl type guys and all that stuff, but it's just they're not going to win. And you look back at past Super Bowl champions, yes, probably Tom Brady with Antonio Brown. He behaved himself that season, he won it. But over and over, even like the great Randy Moss, he never won a Super Bowl championship.
No, and also, you just made my brain start to kick around a little bit. Remember Joe Horn for the Saints when he hid the phone in the padding by the goalpost? And it became almost as a running gag because they always led with these guys. So they were trying to outdo each other, and Chad Ochocinco with the yellow jacket or whatever, the Hall of Fame on the back, popcorn and all, these guys are just trying to outdo each other. And I just think we're at a point now, we're kind of over it.
Yeah, and now they're going to have it. It's funny because Netflix had a lot of success with their quarterback show last season with Patrick Mahomes and Marcus Mariota. And I forget the other guy. But now this season, it's going to be wide receiver driven. So, they're calling it receiver because they're throwing Kelsey in there. So, He's not
Yeah.
a receiver,
No
but
way. No,
yeah,
no.
and that's a good segue because I got to talk about it. Are we oversaturated with the Kelsey brothers? I know they got the podcast going and everything, and just recently, right here where we are in the Philadelphia area, they had WrestleMania over 2 nights at Lincoln Financial Field. Over 70,000 people, good for WWE. But the show-stopping big thing was they had Kelsey and Lane Johnson. They wear their luchador masks and then they take their shirts off and get involved. So, where are you with the whole Kelsey thing?
I tell you what, it's a nice ride. It's a nice ride. Let him have this year. Let him have this year. I'll tell you what, Rey Mysterio doesn't win, though, if it's not for Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But now, let him have this year, and then let Jason go on to what he's going to do. But if we're still having this same conversation this time next year, yeah, I'm done with them. They can have this run until training camp starts. I'll give them till then. That's a cutoff date.
Yeah, and the thing is, Jason's way more. I hate to pick between brothers, but Jason's way more lovable to me. He's an offensive lineman. He's that guy. He's a grunt. He does his job. Travis and the whole, we talked about this during the Super Bowl, the whole Taylor Swift thing, and it's just overdone. He's more entertainment tonight, in my opinion. With the way he's going in his career. Obviously, great career for both of them. They'll probably end up in the Hall of Fame. I was trying to think of if there are any brothers that are in the Hall of Fame currently. I couldn't think of any. But it may be Eli and Peyton Manning. That's always debate. I know Rich Q, who I talk to all the time. He's a Giants guy. So does Eli? Would he join Peyton in the Hall of Fame? He does got 2 rings. I always say his record was not a winning record, though. But I think those 2 rings are going to help him.
I think he should be in, to be honest, for the fact the teams he beat to win those Super Bowls. And I am not an Eli Manning guy whatsoever. The only 2 brothers that pop in my head like that were Clay and Bruce Matthews. They're the
that's a good call. Yes. Yeah, you're right. They are.
Only 2. I mean, even the Golics, as much as like Mike and Bob, they were more personalities. Great, very solid, good football players, but they were more personalities after they left the game. But yeah, sure. Eli should be in. I don't care for him, but those Patriots teams he beat, he put up stellar efforts in those games.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Maybe they should give the Manning cast to the Kelsey. Well, one of them's still playing, but could you imagine like the Kelsey brothers take over that? Every once in a while I'll click over to that on Monday night and listen to a little banter, and maybe they'll call out a play here or there or something that they recognize. But for the most part, it's that saturation point. So it's just like, okay, what else can we watch here? Exactly. But good for them, those guys. You like to see players have that next stage of their life and kind of succeed. Too often we hear the horror stories and we just at Vontae Davis, unfortunately he passed away at 35 years old. They found him, they found him deceased at home. Nobody really knows what happened. I guess they're still trying to figure it out, but too many sad stories like that. And Vontae Davis, obviously the guy that's always going to be remembered for quitting at halftime when he was on the Bills and walking away from the game. But, you wish the best to him and his family. Anything on Vontae Davis or in that story? Or are you ready to move on?
Vontae Davis, he was a very strong member for that Colts team. He was great for that Colts team when he was on there. He was always a solid player. I felt bad for Vernon Davis when he had to come out and speak about it. But when somebody's 35, it's like, all right, what's up? What happened?
Yeah.
It's because one thing, the most erroneous rumor that flies around is CTE. You don't know if it's something about that.
Right.
And we just have to wait to see what happened. Because nobody, knock on wood, nobody healthy just drops dead at 35.
Yeah. Yeah, and they give so much to the game. And that's why, like, when we talk about money, like we were talking about earlier with Stephon Diggs and what he's making and all that, these football players give so much to the game. And their contracts just are not guaranteed. And all the money that they report, 5-year deal for $100 million per se, they may not see the last 2 years of that deal. And it's like the wink secret of the league. So, hopefully the players, they get younger, they get smarter, and I think the biggest thing is they have to have good representation and understand. Look, this is a short time frame, and don't waste your money. Now, there was a story that it's about wasting money, and it's scary because he took it to the public, and next thing you know, it's a huge ESPN story. Rashee Rice, we talked about the world champion, Kansas City Chiefs. He had a good rookie season, has a big catches, including a Super Bowl. But unfortunately, he rents a Lamborghini or owns it. I'm not sure. I don't know why he is. Number one, he was not a first round bonus baby. And he's racing a Corvette apparently. And in Dallas, Texas, they caused a 6-car accident. And then he leaves the scene of the accident. Recently, he's lawyered up and he's taken responsibility. But, you know, what in the world is going on there with Rashee Rice?
Well, you remember what happened? Was it? Shoot, it's probably been 2 years now, maybe even 3 years. Henry Ruggs,
Yes. Yeah.
when he had his accident in Las Vegas. And let's be honest, who amongst us wouldn't be a young kid? And you have this car. He's driving. I believe he rented the Lamborghini up. I'm doing something stupid. So for that point, I feel bad for the kid because it could have been me, it could have been you. At
Yeah.
the same time, it's like once you're at that level, you should have people in your dome telling you you have to be smart. You have to be smart. You could lose everything. And we're going to see if Andy Reid's not the kind of guy who's going to hold on to him.
Yeah. I think, look, the Chiefs will do their investigation, the NFL will do their investigation, but definitely the suspension's coming. And Andy's going to have a long talk with him. That's a tough thing for a lot of these young guys. As you said, they look in our 20s. We all did a bunch of crazy stuff, but imagine having all that money. But you definitely have to be smart and understand. Look, all eyes are on you and everything. And maybe it should be like I remember Chris Carter got in trouble for this at the rookie symposium. He stood up there and told all of them, make sure you got a fall guy in your crew. So when something goes down, you say it was him and not you.
Yeah, that's an absolute fact. I'm fascinated to this day when Plaxico Burress got caught with that, gun in his sweatpants that was loaded. It's like, no, you have your friends with you to hold that in their sweatpants. You do not hold that in your sweatpants.
Yeah, you got to have, number one, they should be around a better crowd. And a lot of times it's family members and friends that they grew up with. They just can't put the past behind them. And they think they owe somebody. But as you said, you got to be smart. And at Plexico, I think later on the NFL did use him as an example because he was able to come back in the league and play for a little bit. Obviously not the same, but he was able to kind of talk to a lot of these younger guys. But sometimes these younger guys, like Fletcher Cox was talking about, behind the scenes this season, sometimes these young guys don't want to listen, and the wisdom of a 34-year-old player, a guy that's 22, he's like, yeah. But, it's the locker room. So, but the thing is, they have to remember it's a job, and that's what all this combine is about. And the Senior Bowl and getting ready for the draft, and now players are visiting teams. They're going for their interview for their big job. They prep themselves their entire life, college as well, and this is their opportunity to shine and get to the next level. So we'll see how that goes. Speaking of getting to the next level, and we're talking to Kevin Midget on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South Network. I played video games a little. I used to play a lot of Madden. Madden was a big thing. Did you just play NCAA football? Because NCAA football was like the college version, kind of Madden, but it was a lot more fun. So they're bringing back NCAA football video game. It's going to be in the summer 2024. I think Caleb Williams, who we're talking about in a few minutes, he's going to be on the cover. But are you excited for that game to come out? Are you a video gamer? Yes, no.
Most definitely. I used to be. I retired around PlayStation 2. I kind of tapped out at that point. But at the same time, I remember the college game. I would run the wishbone offense. I would sit there and make things happen. But then the players started finally, at least I think it was the O'Banion rule in college basketball, Ed and Charles
Yeah.
O'Banion. It's like the players at least, got some money back for it because they were using their likenesses and everything like that. Caleb Williams, the best you're ever going to see him 5 years from now will be on that video game. I'm calling it now.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see that game come back, and we'll use that as a segue. And a lot is coming out. Last week I was talking with Jovan Alford on a show about these quarterbacks and how they move the needle in a pre-draft process. But then I went back and looked at like every first round quarterback from 2000 to last year, and some of the names that come out, and you're like, oh my god, for all the attention these guys get in the pre-draft process, most of them are terrible. You think about Josh Freeman, Jake Locker. I mean, these Paxton Lynch. I mean, these are some of the names. We even talk about Jamarcus Russell. You know what I mean? And what are you thinking in terms of? We know it's a quarterback-driven league, but can these young quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels, Drake May, McCarthy, can they? How many of them are going to stink, basically, is my question to you.
I'll put it to you this way, Lloyd. Out of all these names that are going to be drafted in the first, second round, one of them will be good. One. The rest are going to be bums. It's one of those things will be a trivia question, who was drafted in the first round. And these teams, because it's so quarterback, you need your quarterback to win. You need that quarterback. They're scratch-off tickets. It's like, all right, man, I got to try mine now, especially the ones that go after the third or fourth quarterback. It's just like, oh, that's desperation time at its finest right there. So maybe one will pan out. The rest of them, nah, probably not.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. It's a crapshoot. It's 50-50. And I used to love the draft more than anybody. I used to go up every year to Radio City Music Hall. I get credentialed, and I'd sit there all day. And back then, I think they did the first 3 rounds on that Saturday. So it was a great long day to sit there and network and just like, wow, all the changes going on. And I still remember I was talking to Aaron Rodgers, of all people, outside the bathroom in 2005. Yeah. He's sitting there waiting. He's seeing guys like Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown, and I forget the other. Oh, Alex Smith went number 1. Seeing that just shows you, Alex Smith goes number 1, and Aaron Rodgers is basically outside. I was back when the men's room, everybody used the same place, and we're in the hallway talking. I'm like, hang in there, kid. You know what I mean? And he had to sit there and wait until the 20s, till the Packers got him. But as you said, it's an inexact science with these quarterbacks. But let's take a look at them first and foremost. So I'll go down. So Chicago Bears have the number 1 pick. Obviously, Carolina was terrible, and that was a terrible trade that they did, and they're stuck with Bryce Young. But Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams. I'm hoping to get a guy on from LA that I know that covers the USC games. But when I watch Caleb Williams, everybody's comparing him. They're trying to say Mahomes. I don't see that. I see him. He's more like a Dak Prescott to me type of guy. You know what I mean? If everything's on schedule and the team around him's nice, I think he's going to be good in terms of that regard. But, we know this is the Bears, and there's always some adversity coming. So what are we seeing when we see Caleb Williams and thumbs up, thumbs down?
Well, I think we pretty much know my opinion on Caleb Williams at this point. That being said, I think it really depends on a lot of these guys. Yeah, definitely. I think it definitely depends where these guys land. Because if you're thrust to playing from day one and you don't have a good offensive line or weapons around you, look at Tim Couch. Look at Cade McNown with the Bears back in the day.
Yeah.
It's just like you have to be in the right system. And Dante Culpepper with the Vikings landed in the right system. And it just depends where you land. Now, Caleb Williams, I mean, guys are pulling the plug quicker on these young kids, too. Look at Justin Fields, already traded. He's with Pittsburgh now.
Yeah.
So Caleb Williams, he's going to get 2 years. And I guarantee you they're going to move on once again if he doesn't deliver.
Yeah, and they're coach killers, these first-round quarterbacks. Coach and general manager killers. And it's going to be interesting because you got Matt Eberflus there. You got Ryan Poles, the general manager there. They're both kind of on a hot seat. The Bears have invested a lot this offseason, bringing in free agents and trying to redo that roster. And as you said, will it work? And if not, they're going to blow this thing up. And to me, in that division, we know they're already looking up at the Packers and the Lions. So, we'll see how they do with Caleb Williams. He's going to be the previous favorite. Everybody's going to keep talking about that. In his workout, he looked good, but obviously these workouts, they're in pristine situations, throwing at their receivers, and they know the plays. There's no pass rush, and obviously they're going to look good in those situations. So Jaden Daniels, everybody was talking him up at his LSU workout, and not surprisingly, the Washington Commanders had, I heard, a contingent of about 6 to 10 people there watching him. So I have a feeling Jaden Daniels is going to go to Washington, and then you wonder, okay, it is, Terry McLaurin and the rest of the group there, is that enough to elevate him? I know they got Austin Eckler coming in there as well, but Jaden Daniels, when I look at him, he's a little thin side. I worry about him getting hit in the National Football League.
If you look at the last year's draft with the 3 quarterbacks that came out, Richardson, Young, and Stroud, I myself thought the best one out of the mix was going to be Richardson. He had some injury problems with his size. I thought he would be all right. Young, I knew was going to be the bust out of the 3. He might be a Hall of Fame player. What do I know? But I knew he was going to, especially going to that Carolina team. Stroud, on the other hand, boom, rose above the shoulders of everyone else. This year, he's got weapons in Washington. If Daniels ends up in Washington, you do have some weapons there. You can lean on Eckler. You have McLaurin. You have some stuff you can work with. Once again, like I said, it depends where May lands, too. What can he do? McCarthy, where's he going to land? Is it going to be Minnesota?
Right. And, with Drake May, I think at 3, New England's going to take whoever drops to them there, and I think Drake May probably will be their guy, and unfortunately for him, he wore number 10 in North Carolina, and immediately I'm thinking, oh god, he's another Sam Howell or he's Mitch Trubisky. You hate to have that bias against quarterbacks from certain schools. And Stroud was able to beat it for Ohio State. We know for years, Ohio State, they said they could not develop a quarterback. And Stroud finally did it for them. But Drake May, some are saying he's the most NFL ready. Any thoughts on him?
If he ends up in New England, then I'm against May. Because I think you're right. I think he will end up there. I just don't see the weapons for him to utilize to be successful, I don't know. Maybe it's just for the fact Belichick all these years, the guys after Brady that he had come in, Belichick's gone now, so that's still, the stigmatism's still in my mind. But it's hard to see somebody go in New England since Tony Eason or Steve Grogan to be successul since Brady.
Yeah. There's been always, there's always been, Jimmy G, he was there. He was there. Yeah. Rohan Davey. I mean, I can go on with some of those backups that they had there. Guys that, New England, they just never had. And now they have Jacoby Brissett has come back to New England. I think he's going to be that bridge quarterback, another guy who, he was able to step in, do some good things. But they were good at handing the ball off, and that's probably what Gerard Mayo. I know he's saying he's not going to be Belichick Jr., but I think he's going to develop a game plan where even if it's Alex Van Pelt is the offense coordinator there now, I think they're going to be run heavy and then try to lean on that defense. But as you were saying, New England, they're firmly looking up at the rest of the division, and they have a lot of ground to gain there. I think the Bills, even though that they've gotten rid of Stephon Diggs, they're still going to be a quality team. And I'll end the quarterback talk with, all right, who's going to be the number 4 quarterback? And I'll give you the 2 names and, 3 names, and you kind of give me a thumbnail. And now J.J. McCarthy has been moving. He's this year's riser. Everybody's talking him up. And, he reminds me of like when Mac Jones came out of Alabama. Everybody was talking Mac Jones up. He's the next level. He's that guy that gets it done. An ultimate leader. He's coming from college. So J.J. McCarthy moving up the list. You also have Michael Penix Jr., who had that amazing workout. And then you have Bo Nix, who's kind of the wild card. So the Talk to me about those three guys.
If I have my choice of the three, I think McCarthy's just one of those guys who won a national title. Boom, buzz. We're gonna pop him up. We're gonna pop him up. Uh, Penix is the one. He's the one. I'm not a big Bo Nix guy. Penix is the
Hmm.
one in the right situation. If he gets the maturation process where he does not thrust it in right away, you might have something there. That's the one I would lean towards out of those three.
Yeah, he had that nice workout, and he has his throwing motion is a little fluke, kooky looking, but he can really sling that ball. He's left-handed. He can throw it 70 yards in a flick of a wrist. And I think, as you did, if he can overcome his injury past, he's a 6-year senior. He played at Indiana first. I know a lot of the Penn State people still remember him diving for the pylon. Was he in, not in when he won against them for Indiana? And then he had a couple ACL injuries, but he was able to overcome that. Had a great senior season for Washington. Obviously, the national championship game was not the best, but I out of those three, I do have to agree with you that Penix has the most upside potential. Bo Nix, I watched a lot of him at Auburn. I just didn't think he was big at Auburn, and then I think anybody that goes to Oregon is going to put up some numbers because they're always slinging it around. So, yeah, but as you said, what do we know? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I I still remember all the dopes, the dirty 30 going up there, booing Donovan McNabb. You know what I mean? And was he he ended look, he may not be popular, but he probably was the best Eagles quarterback in their history in terms of statistics and postseason wins and all that stuff. So you just never know. Everybody wanted Ricky Williams, and Ricky Williams smoking pot for about 2 years suspended. So you just never know how these prospects are going to turn out.
I got a question for you, Lloyd. I remember that draft. Everyone does remember that draft who's in this area. I didn't want Ricky Williams. I knew the Eagles needed a quarterback. I wanted Achilles Smith.
Oh, it's
He could
funny
throw the
you say
ball
that.
70 yards in the air. I was like, oh, we need Achilles Smith.
Yeah, another guy. It's funny you say that because I liked him too. I remember debating. One of my family members was like, "Oh, I like Cade McNown." You know what I mean? And one family member was like, "Oh, it's Dante Culpepper." But those guys, you're like, eh. But I liked Achilles too, and it's funny because he was an overage prospect, and he came from Oregon, from a junior college, and he put up these big stats, but he had that baseball arm and just looks like such a, you know, he looked like the guy, you know what I mean, the prototype. And then he gets to Cincinnati, and you talk about bad landing situations, bang, and he just never gelled there. And I think a big thing of it is back in the day, if you remember, a lot of these bonus quarterbacks would hold out. And Achilles, I think, held out right before the season started, and he never had training camp, and his career went downhill from there. So, yeah, that's another one of those situations. And I always have buddies, like we all do, buddies that we play fantasy football with, or we're at the bar with them, and they always say, "You liked." What do you know? You liked Achilles Smith over Donovan, or you told my buddies always say, "Oh, well, you're the football guy, and you told me you said Freddie Mitchell was going to be a good receiver." You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, well, I guess maybe I was wrong on that, but he did catch a 4th and 26 pass. Oh
The people's
God.
champion. He was the people's champion.
Yeah, but the draft is always hindsight is 2020. I know Howie Roseman. He finally admitted and was like, "All right, I'll take it on the chin for this one." Taking Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. Like what the hell was I thinking? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, the whole thing is the Eagles finally got out of the situation of the Brandon Graham Earl Thomas thing because BG came on, became BG, and
Right.
everything else. And now it's like, now the Rager thing. That became the new BG Thomas thing.
Yeah.
It's the Rager Jefferson thing now.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And I always another one. I was like, I remember Jason Witten. The pick was I was like, Jason Witten's the pick. Jason Witten, and they EJ. What was it? Oh God, from Rutgers. What was his name?
Not
I
EJ
can't.
Manuel. That's what name that's popping in my head.
No,
It's not
I'm getting it wrong. It was
Manuel.
initials name. I can't believe I'm not remembering this.
Oh,
But
out of Rutgers, LJ Smith.
L.J. Smith. Yes,
Yes.
they took over Jason Witten. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, fans always remember that, but teams, they push on, they move on and say, all right. But the good thing is now NFL teams are finally, and I got so tired of this for a long time with, the Eagles. They would draft a guy and they would keep him around. They would make him inactive, like just cut him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We know he can't play. You know he can't play. Just move on from him. Inactive every Sunday. Get some guy that's hungry from the Arena Football League or one of these spring leagues that could come in and can help you out. Because obviously a lot of times with these first rounders, they get the money and then they kind of just like they fizzle.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Lloyd, when you said these coaches and GMs are on hot seats now. Before there was more stability. They knew they were going to be there for at least 5 years or so. They could let it play out. Now it's like you admit your mistakes. You got a
Yeah,
2 year window, and it's like, all right, we got to go. We got to move on, or I'm out of a job right now.
yeah,
The pride factor is gone.
and that's good because you got to win on the field, and that's the big thing. You just, like you look at a lot of these old linemen, and sometimes like Danny Watkins, the fireman at the Eagles, everyone knew he was getting beat. Get him
Oh,
out of there,
oh yeah.
and they luckily they stepped away from him, and we're talking about draft history and busts here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football and 1029 The Game, Broad Street South Network. We have Kevin Midget with us as usual. And yeah, a lot of crazy stuff leading up to draft. The draft is going to be in Detroit this year. It's on April 25th is the date, and everybody's getting, hyped up for that in a couple of weeks. And Kevin, you brought this up, and I wanted to talk to you about this. One of the high level draft picks is Micah Parsons from a couple of years ago. And yes, he's a game wrecker, a guy who makes a difference. I don't know if everybody was comparing him to a young LT and all that stuff. I mean, he's a solid pro, and but the thing is, his teams obviously every year they fizzle out in the playoffs. That's not really his fault, but he has a piece of it. So what's going on with Micah Parsons with the Cowboys right now, and are they going to be able to move past this thing?
If I'm not mistaken, Micah Parsons in the same draft as Devontae Smith. So technically, I believe they both have 2 years left on their contract, no matter what. Micah Parsons has been a Pro Bowler for 3 years now in a row.
Yeah,
Pardon me. Nah, that's a guy you would take, but you have to be able to pay him. Who can pay him and you have to trade for him as well.
yeah. And he's talking about possibly holding out, and it's all about the money. Show me the money. The old Rod Tidwell from Jerry Maguire, and as great as defensive players are, and receivers, and every position other than quarterback, they have to fight for their money. And Kevin, the big one is Dak Prescott's one of the high. I forget his cap number is going to be close to $50 million or something crazy like that this year, and he's on a hot seat. And Jerry Jones has basically said, "All right, we're all in for this season, and if it don't work, I'm blowing this thing up." And Dak's going. Mike McCarthy, the head coach, is going. I think he needs to fire himself as GM, but that's another conversation. But do you think Michael Parsons will get his money, and how do you think this is going to work out?
I don't think any of these guys are going to get the money they want. I don't think Hassan Reddick's going to get the money that he wants. Micah Parsons isn't going to get the money that he wants as well. The one that I think Dak Prescott, it's like 51 million. Yeah, you're right. It's around $50 million. I heard a rumor of them drafting Penix, like, moving up early to get him. And it's like, what did you just do with Trey Lance, by the way? That guy didn't sniff
Right.
the field. Dallas, I want them to keep things status quo. I don't want them to change anything. I think they're doing a great job. I don't see a situation where Parsons can come to the Eagles because once again, you got to pay Devontae Smith. They're in the same draft. Somebody's, and that was
Yeah.
a big rumor about, because Micah Parsons loves the Eagles. He talks about them all the time. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, he's from Harrisburg, and he's a Pennsylvania kid, and a lot of people are saying they should have taken him instead of Devontae Smith, but the receiver was more of a need for the Eagles at that point, and you know, like I said, hindsight's 2020 with these drafts, and people coming in and out, and did they make the right pick? And like you always have to wait 2 to 3 years to see, okay, did this work out? Obviously, Dallas is very happy to have Parsons, and Jones is going to have to get out the checkbook. I think there's no way they don't pay him because Leighton Vander Esch had to retire because of neck injury. And I know they signed Kendricks coming over from the Vikings, but they need more. Now you talk about that outside linebacker position, and you brought the name up, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. The Eagles trade Hassan Reddick for a 2026 third round pick, which could become a second rounder if he plays 67.5 snaps or has 10 sacks in 2024. But I think the Eagles got kind of fleeced here, and I think it was a bad decision. Trading him to the New York Jets. I know there's a relationship with Joe Douglas, their general manager, used to be with the Eagles, but I just thought Reddick, you had him under contract. Yeah, he's not going to hold out because you can get fined up to, I think, $40,000 or more per missed day of camp. So that adds up real quick. These guys aren't holding out like back in the day, like we were talking about with Kelly Smith and those rest of those guys. But they could use Hassan Reddick and a team that went from 70 sacks down to like 40 some, and you saw at the end of the season the size system or whether it was Patricia or what, they weren't getting the heat they needed, and he's their key guy.
Well, there's a couple things this tells me. The funniest thing I heard, by the way, is Aaron Donald retired because Desai went to the Rams and he thought he'd have to drop back into coverage. I thought that was funny. It tells me the Jets are all in. They have to be all in right now because you have Aaron Rodgers in once a short window of time. So it's like, all right, let's go for it right now. Well, on the Eagles side, it tells me they're going to trade that pick. There's something they're going to do. Howie's going to do. He doesn't like to sit on his hands during the draft. He's going to move up to do something to acquire somebody. And there's no way they're going to wait for that pick. There's no way. A team that's apparently built to try and win a Super Bowl like the Eagles are this year, there's no way that they're going to sit there and wait for that pick. So something's coming.
Yeah. No, and Howie has moved. I think I saw a stat. I think it was like 4 of the last 5 years. He has moved up and down the draft board. And if they've earmarked a guy, he's going to get him. And last week at the end of the show, I wouldn't let Jovan get out of here without saying, all right, do the Eagles go offensive lineman or defensive lineman? That's their MO. So what are you thinking? So I'll throw some. Yeah. So I'll get your thoughts, and then I'll kind of throw some names at, and you can see if it fit or not for the team.
Well, what is it? Avonte Maddox is back now. They signed Avonte Maddox. So that being said, a cornerback's probably off the books now. So where are you leaning towards at this point? Are we getting a safety as an Eagles fan / watcher?
Yeah.
It's either a safety or we're right back at the defensive line because it's not a linebacker.
Yeah, Jerry Robinson. I know. And the thing is, I just think with the Eagles, they're going to, with Fletcher Cox retiring, they're going to try to beef up that defensive line. That's probably the first area they will look because the defense was so bad. But offensive line is deep this year, Kevin, and they may say, okay, maybe if we can have an opportunity to get some of these tackles or like I'm saying, some of these edge guys maybe to get a chance. But Penn State, Oli Fasanu, the Eagles are 22 right now. They probably have to move up to get him. He's a pass blocker. You know what I mean? He's more of a technician. He's not a road grader. But I don't know if you watched a lot of Penn State games this year, but what are you thinking when you say Oli Fasanu, their offensive tackle?
I think I agree with you entirely. The offensive line, it's loaded this year. That's where you could really get somebody. Do you want to use a first-round pick on somebody because it is so loaded is a thing? And you're right. He's played well. I've seen footage of him. He's definitely played well. But if I'm looking at my list right here, and I've seen the Eagles' past history, I'm thinking Mims from Georgia at some point, just to add the Georgia Bulldog back into it.
Yeah. He's another one that somebody they could look at. And if you're talking about, all right, do they want to get another pass rusher or defensive line help? You have Latu Lateo. I don't know if I'm saying that right, from the University of Washington. He's an edge, another guy that gets a lot of pressure on a quarterback. He had 26 combined sacks and hits this season. Dallas Turner, he's an edge from Alabama. Howie's lately has been in there with these SEC guys. Another guy that can come off the edge and maybe help them out. And the name that always I keep hearing, and I think they're going to have him in for a visit, and it's going to be interesting because you were saying safety, and they bring Avonte Maddox back, is Cooper DeJean, a young guy who broke his leg from Iowa. He's coming back. We'll see if he's ever going to if he's going to switch to safety or he's going to stay at corner. So I've heard the Eagles name mentioned with him, and yeah. So, but I think as much as everybody would like them to take Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback, just for name's sake, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be offensive line. I really do. I think the Eagles, they just with Stoutland, they believe in building up front, and that's going to help out Jalen Hurts immensely because maybe they'll get some kind of running game going with Saquon Barkley, and it's going to be. I think that one guard spot may be a little up in the air right now for the Eagles because they just gave Juergens his money. And then you have the youngster filling in there for Jason Kelsey. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's offensive line. What are you thinking there?
The more that we talk about it now, the more I'm almost 90% sure it's an offensive lineman. You sit there and you talk about it. It's like, all right, Maddox is coming back. And it's like, all right, are they going to grab a safety? Probably not.
Yeah.
And then it's like defensive line. There's some parts there now. And it's offensive line. You have to solidify that offensive line because, once again, there are some parts you don't know how they're going to work. And once again, there's always an injury factor. One of the things that have always broke the Eagles' way is the fact there weren't a lot of injuries on the offensive line. So what's that tell me? We're due. So you have to be prepared for something to happen. Yeah, it's an offensive lineman, Lloyd. I think we cracked the code.
Yeah, and the thing, Kevin, is, and you have Jordan Mailata, who they drafted in the 7th round in 2018. He's turned out to be a very good left tackle. Landon Dickerson is the left guard that they gave the extension to. They recently broke the bank, gave him his money, so Landon Dickerson's going to be around. Former 2nd rounder. Cam Juergens, 2nd rounder 2022, stepping in for Jason Kelsey. Big shoes to fill there. Tyler Steen at the right guard. That's the spot where I'm like, all right, 3rd round pick last year. The Eagles may look to get somebody in there to push him, somebody that maybe could play tackle, but also kick inside early part of his career. And then obviously Lane Johnson, we just talked about him, Kelsey's tag team partner. And I think he's got a couple years left in him playing at a high Pro Bowl level, but he has been on the team since 2013, former 1st rounder. So, up front, I think that's where the Eagles are going to go.
Well, if you think about it, we've talked about like the last 3 years because it was like we were talking about Jason Kelsey maybe retiring for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
But what did Jason Kelsey do by hanging around those 3-4 years? Probably solidified his spot in Canton is what he did. Is Lane Johnson now at that point as well, where the body might be a little spent, but he's like, if I hang out here for another 3 to 4 years at that Pro Bowl level, now am I going to Canton as well? And that's because he's had injuries over the past couple of years, little, nagging things here and there.
Yeah.
Because once again, there's tread off the tires. But you got to think about somebody who's going to step into his spot now at some point.
Yeah, and they're going to look at that, and they've invested a lot of money in Saquon Barkley, so they're going to try to run the football, I think, a lot more, and that'll take some of the pressure off of Jalen Hurts because last year 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. That was just a high number of throws for him. Maybe limit the number of throws that he has, and maybe they won't try to push the ball so far down the field. Shorter, more intermediate routes for Jalen Hurts. But we'll segue on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Broad Street South Network. We're talking to Kevin Midgett. wanted to talk with you about, and particularly with the Eagles. They just had the owners meeting, and there were some rule changes and some non-changes. So the two I wanted to talk to you about was there's going to be no hip drop tackles. Now, everybody's like, oh boy, all I want to see is when somebody's in an open field, he gets tackled illegally, and they get an untimed down from the spot of that foul. But when you're a smaller defensive back trying to hit one of these backs out there like a Derrick Henry, you got to do what you can to get this guy on the ground. And I'm just wondering, Kevin, do you think they're moving towards like flag football? Or, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to be a defensive player in the National Football League.
Lloyd, if we are, knock on wood, still on this earth by 2050, you will not even recognize the game right now. It is ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, there is nothing you can do. The offensive possession skill set guys are getting bigger and faster. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the secondary guys, they're still like 165, 185 pounds if you're lucky. And you have to tackle these guys. You, by any means necessary to get them to the ground, is what you have to do. And that you can't horse collar, which I agree with, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There's certain things you just can't do anymore. And I don't know what they're supposed to do to these guys now. I mean, you barely, one-on-one is a mismatch as it is. So how are you supposed to tackle guys in this league anymore?
Yeah, the hit zone is ridiculous. After the Brady rule from '08, you can't. And too often you see a defensive lineman, he's just trying to get the quarterback on the ground. He's diving for him, and you hit the quarterback in the legs, and it's automatic penalty. You know what I mean? It's like, what can these guys do? And everybody's like, well, maybe they should hire a rugby coach to teach them how to tackle the right way. But in live game action, you're just trying to get them on the ground. You know what I mean? And you can't go high anymore. So, where's the strike zone? Where are they allowed to hit? And now they can't do this hip drop. So, it's just getting harder and harder. I agree with you for these defensive guys. And talking about the Eagles and their offensive line and everything, one rule that they didn't touch is the tush push. Around for another season. And, I think it's good that they're going to allow the NFL to kind of say, okay, let the defensive coordinators figure out how to stop it. Everybody talk about the wildcat and all that stuff and the pre-snap motion a couple of years ago. They'll figure out a way how to stop this thing. And I think the Eagles, not to jinx them or anything, but I don't think they're going to be as effective without Jason Kelce because he was just so good at, the timing of that play and getting low on a defender. So what's your thoughts on the tush push? Should have stayed? Could it keep going?
I want to be on record, and I think I have in the past, by saying I hate the tush push. I think it's terrible. I think it's boring. But as a Eagles fan and supporter, I enjoy the fact that it works for my team. That being said, I like how the NFL came out, and they're like, the Eagles are just very good at it. So basically, it's like, you guys need to get better and quit complaining. They're not cheating. They're not doing it. It's a football play. So unless you can stop it, then shut it. So... But is it boring? The one thing is now, you are right, because the Wildcat was a thing at one point. Everyone in the Wildcat. I think Lucas was a quarterback for the Dolphins. And
oh, yeah, Ray Lucas,
yeah. They were running that left and right. What happened the next year? Everyone shut the Wildcat down. You never saw it again. So if teams start to shut down the tush push, the thing the Eagles can do is do a play action, set up for that, and spin out a tight end. That's the play to do. That would be next year's play. But, yeah, until they outlaw, until somebody can stop it, you go with what works.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see Kellen Moore, who's coming in there. Does he keep utilizing it? But as you said, that could be a formation where they do some different passing out of it and the pup pass or just something. But that's going to be interesting. This free agency, there's been some big signings. The player we talked about earlier was J.J. McCarthy, and a pro that he's being compared to a lot is Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins goes to the Atlanta Falcons, signs with them for another big contract. Cousins has made $331 million in career earnings. And by the way, he has one playoff win in 13 seasons. Good for him that he gets his money, but what are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins? Can he succeed with the Atlanta Falcons?
I'm going to give Kirk Cousins is flowers. He deserves them. I mean, he cashes checks, but I tell you what, he'll throw for 4,000 yards. He'll throw for 25 to 30 touchdowns, maybe, and they'll lose in the first round. Atlanta has some weapons there. They had to get a quarterback in there. They have some offensive skill set people. That being said, Kirk Cousins isn't winning the Super Bowl, but I'll tell you what, you'll pay attention to your team all year. That's what he
Yeah,
does. That's
yeah,
Kirk Cousins.
and he's going to fantasy football wise. He'll get the ball to
Oh,
Justin
yeah.
Jefferson. He'll put up some, not Jefferson, but that's who he used to. But he'll get it to Pitts. He'll get it to Drake London. He'll get it to Bijan Robinson. As you said, a lot of weapons there. They got Zach Robinson coming over as offense coordinator from the Rams, and Raheem Moore is going to allow that offense to do their thing. He'll concentrate on defense. So Atlanta is going to be an interesting team. I was previewing that division a couple weeks ago. That's the NFL least. You know what I mean? Like the NFC South. Last year you had Tampa Bay winning at 9-8, and it's always pretty wide open. So I think the Falcons can jump in this mix, and it may say the first one to 10 wins may get it done.
I think Atlanta wins that division on paper right now. Atlanta wins that division with, let's call them 9-7-1. There's always a tie. There's always something weird in that division. But yeah, I'm New Orleans, Carolina, definitely not. Tampa Bay, you're going with Baker and older Mike Evans. Yeah, why not Atlanta?
Yeah, why not? And then when you talk about the running back position, it's interesting to see who's getting signed and who's. So the Chiefs decided to re-sign Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You had J.K. Dobbins, vision, which is good. He's coming off of ACL for the Ravens, but he may find a spot. Do you think the running backs have found a rebirth here? Everybody's saying with the Saquon signing and Derrick Henry going to the Ravens that everybody's talking about the running backs once again.
I think it's one of those 5% kind of things. Like the top guys that have been playing over the last 5 years are getting paid. The rest of the guys, they're the Dobbins of the mix. They're the ACL tears. I just really think it's at a point where they're not going to come back from the fact that I'm going to draft a running back in the third or fourth round and I'm going to plug him in right away. I don't see these guys getting that kind of money anymore besides your Derrick Henrys, Saquon Barkleys, those kind of guys. And until someone else pops up from the young group, maybe a future Bijan Robinson or somebody like that, I don't see it happening for that position anymore.
Yeah, and one of the teams that we talked about in terms of running backs moving and it's the Tennessee Titans. I want to get your thought on the Tennessee Titans. They've been making a lot of moves this off season. We'll see if their young quarterback's the answer there, but they bring in Brian Callahan, a former OC at Cincinnati, to be their head coach. But then they get L'Jarius Sneed. They just traded for him. You talk about, teams changing their roster, and the Chiefs got to pay other people, so they trade Sneed to the Titans, and they got Cushenberry, the center, coming over from the Broncos, and they Pollard, the running back, coming over from the Dallas Cowboys, and they're picking 7. So, what are you thinking with the Tennessee Titans?
I'm hearing Dream Team, Lloyd. I'm hearing a Dream Team is what you're saying. Sneed has Maxwell or Asamoah written all over him right there. He's got his title. He got his money. Pollard, you saw what he could do as the main guy last year. He's not that guy. He's the side piece. He's not the guy who's going to sit there and take you all the way. You still have, you have older wide receivers, younger wide receivers. They don't know what they're doing. They're just getting a hodgepodge of young and old, and hey, let's see what we got, guys.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting there. Obviously, the key position is quarterback, and we'll see if he's able to step into prime time. I'm just not sure. They have Malik Willis there as well, but the quarterback situation is kind of unsettled. So, yeah, but they're an interesting team. So they'll be at 7, and they got a lot to clean up, and in terms of the team and what was going on there, and we can talk about like coaches. Now this is interesting, Kevin. You got coaches coming in. We had a lot of changes before in this offseason. New coaches coming. Jim Harbaugh with the LA Chargers. Is he going to be able to get it done? He has Justin Herbert there. They just traded, and we talked about, trading people. They traded Mike Williams. I know he's coming off an injury, but they trade him to the New York Jets. So the LA Chargers, Are they a team that's going to bounce back, or what are you thinking with them?
I think I feel bad for Justin Herbert. There has to be some plan in motion where Harbaugh takes that gig and you lose Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and he's behind all this. They've talked to him about this. It's not like he got the job and they're like, all right, now we're going to get rid of all these guys.
Yeah,
They have to have some sort of plan in motion. But Justin Herbert, like if you're him right now, are you like, what's going on now? He has to start anew. All he has, I believe, is Quentin Johnston and Palmer, and that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So
They
it's
don't
like,
have a lot on offense.
no, they do not.
They have Rashawn Slater, very good young tackle, but they have the number 5 pick, so I think they're definitely going to go. And Gus Edwards is not going to be the last thing that they do. That's who they're
No,
brought
no,
in.
no.
So they're definitely going to. A running back, obviously, that's later in draft, but I think they're probably going to go receiver, in this draft, and they have to because, as you said, Justin Herbert, one of the best young throwers in the game, and he's got to have some weapons. So that's going to be interesting there. Um, the Las Vegas Raiders, you got Antonio Pierce sticking out there, in that division. He was able to keep the job. A lot of times that was good because a lot of times you see the interim come in, give the team a spark, and then they're at the end of the season say thanks but no thanks. We're going to go get the next high-powered offensive coordinator out there. So Antonio Pierce gets the job, but they're another one. Their quarterback situation is very unsettled for the uh, Las Vegas Raiders, and they're picking at the 13 position. So is that going to be enough to get up there? And we talked about the quarterback's probably going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I just don't know if one of these high-powered guys is going to be there for the Raiders.
They're not. No, they're not going to be there. It's like you're. The one thing I read was Antonio Pierce did the worst thing ever. He won just enough to keep that job. It's like if he would have just maybe lost another game, he would have been lined up for another better job. What do you have, O'Connell there, Gardner Minshew? You're not doing anything with those guys, and they're just good enough to be not bad enough if it makes any sense.
Right.
So unless they make a move of some sort, I mean, you're stuck in that purgatory in the middle there.
Yeah, and then you have an owner and Mark Davis. He's not as much of a meddler as his father, but he's a meddler. He's got his hand in the mix, and that's another job where all right, you hire the guy to be fired. We see the Raiders too often changing coaches. I think they set a record a couple of years ago. They had like a different coach for like 6 straight seasons. They had a bunch of one and done coaches, or they just decided to change right away. Now, one of the coaching changes I wanted to get your thoughts on, and we're coming down the home stretch here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Broad Street South Network. And we talked about this team a little bit earlier. In the Eagles division, the Washington Commanders. Dan Quinn comes over. Dallas, the defense was better in the regular season. They got torched in the playoffs. Is Dan Quinn the right guy for this Washington job? And what do you see Washington doing? I know we talked about Jaden Daniels or some other combination there. They're moving on from Sam Howell, but what do you think Washington's going to do?
I think the question is anybody the right guy for that Washington job? It's every year. It's almost like, all right, let's start over again. All right, let's do this. It's like they have a couple pieces there, and it becomes once again the fact it's a quarterback-driven league. Unless you have that guy, there's not much you can do. Like certain teams, you have to either have that stout defense, and we're going to run the ball, and we're going to do this. Like Cleveland last year with Joe Flacco, lightning in a bottle. They had that defense. So unless you have somebody that can step in right away, I think that's the way you need to build your teams these days. Have a strong defense until you get lucky enough to have that quarterback come around, have a running back, have a good offensive line. I mean, in my opinion, that's how you go.
Yeah, and they have a lot of work to do. This is another team where, kind of like what you were saying, they were rudderless for so long, and with Daniel Snyder's ownership group, and the team was just kind of falling apart. Now they bring in Joshua Harris, and Magic Johnson has a little piece of the whole thing, but it's Joshua Harris's team, and they're trying to move in a new direction. But with Dan Quinn. Obviously, Ron Rivera was the good soldier and tried to help out a team that was, he was cleaning up a bunch of messes all the time for Daniel Snyder, and you hate to see Ron Rivera go out like that, classic guy. But I think Washington at 2, they're going to try to see the quarterback that they're probably going to have to decide, like we said, do they like Drake May? Do they like Jaden Daniels? Receiver position, they have Terry McLaurin there, but they may need some help there. Now, here's an interesting thing, Kevin. I wanted to get your take on. Now, Arizona's at 4. If you're Arizona, do you stay pat, stay there, get Marvin Harrison Jr., who's really going to help Kyler Murray and open up that offense, or do you trade back? I mean, because they need a lot for Arizona. What do you think in terms of Arizona Cardinals in the draft?
The player I'm most interested to see coming out of this draft is Marvin Harrison Jr. That's a guy I want to see what he can do on the NFL field. If I'm Arizona, though, you got to trade back. You got to trade back. There's too much to do. You're going to waste the first couple years of his career anyway. You're not going to get the use out of him that you really want. You need to trade back, acquire multiple picks, and then try to build your franchise back up again.
Yeah, and I'm sort of with you in terms of everybody sending out these quarterbacks and a few of the defenders and the receiver that ran the fastest time in the combine. But the story of the draft is Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy that did not drop a pass all last season, unguardable. I watched a lot of him in key situations. I watched that Penn State game. I watched the Michigan game. And both those games, they were on. I know they lost to Michigan, but when the game was on the line and they needed a play, they were going to him. Now, Michigan, I think they played a box and one on him. Michigan, they had like 3 guys, and everywhere he went, if he went to the bathroom or the sidelines, they were next to him. But, I do agree with you that Harrison Jr. is a special talent. And it's interesting. He's not one of those diva type receivers, Kevin. He seems to keep his mouth shut, does his work, and just goes home at night. So, it's going to be exciting to see where he lands. He's another guy, as you were saying, when you were getting excited about the draft, that definitely he moves the needle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, who did he learn from the best? His dad. His dad was a pro's pro. I sat there, I ran my route, I did my job. He's not going to be that guy. He grew up, watching the game how it should be played, how to basically respect your quarterback at the same time. But once again, his dad did have Peyton Manning. So We'll see how that works in the future. But that guy, he's a game changer. If he lands on the right team, he could be instantaneously effective.
Yeah, and we talked about Ohio State. We talked a little bit about the quarterbacks. Now there was an interesting thing happened. Justin Fields traded from Chicago Bears for only a 6th-round pick. This is another one where I'm like, man, I almost want to go back to the old days where these GMs are like, no, I'm going to hold on to a guy. The Bears were like, we don't want to have a quarterback competition. They basically just said, all right, take him. Justin Fields for a 6th rounder. I know he had his struggles in terms of moving the team, and his record was not the best. But only a 6th rounder. They're saying, yeah, it could go up to a 4th rounder. But what do you think in terms of both sides of that? Talk about how the Bears ended up and what the Steelers are doing in terms of Justin Fields.
I think for the fact the Bears knew they're taking Caleb Williams. That was a given from the get-go. They were taking him. We got to get this guy out of here, that kind of thing. The fact they got a 6th round, I think if he performs at a certain level, it moves up to a 5th or 4th or something like that. But that being said, they're geniuses. You get Russell Wilson on the cheap, no doubt. The fact is, if Russell Wilson plays 17 games, it's highly unlikely, I'm thinking, but you got him on the cheap. He can groom Justin Fields. He can sit back, actually, and not have to just sit there and run around and do all these things. He can learn the position of quarterback for a little bit longer under someone like Russell Wilson. I thought that was a great move by Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and the thing is, Pittsburgh is only paying $1 million this season to Russell Wilson. Denver's on the hook for $39 million to him, so why not? Yeah, take a look-see with him, and it's a good situation to have. Now they have the veteran leader, a guy who's in his mid-30s, the pro's pro, and then you're going to have Justin Fields being able to learn behind him, and then maybe he could be the Steelers quarterback of the future because they've been waiting. since Ben Roethlisberger retired, it's just been a revolving door. And particularly, Kenny Pickett. You talk about trades that should happen and shouldn't happen. He gets traded to the Eagles from the Steelers. I think actually this is another one where the Steelers made out well, and the Eagles, you're like, what are you doing? Kenny Pickett. I know he's from South Jersey, and he said he might have been an Eagles fan growing up, but I just don't see it with Kenny Pickett. I think that trade may come back and bite the Eagles. I think it was a 5th rounder and some change.
I think the one thing I did hear through the rumorville rather that made sense was if you bring Justin Fields into Philadelphia as Jalen Hurts' backup, and the crowd's going to start calling for Justin Fields if Jalen Hurts struggles.
I agree with that.
And then it brings back the Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, that kind of thing. So just to eliminate all that, it's like, yeah, we're going to pass on that one right there. Because no one's calling for Kenny Two Gloves to come in and replace Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, okay. And already, and they said Pickett didn't want to stay and compete with Wilson, which I'm like, Pickett, you were lucky enough to be the number one, only first-round quarterback taken in 2022. And speaking of that 2022 draft, Kevin, who was the best quarterback taken? You're talking about crapshoots at quarterback.
2020. Is this Mr. Irrelevant?
Yes, sir. Brock Purdy was the best quarterback.
We're Brock Purdy? We're going Brock Purdy on that one.
Yeah. And all the other quarterbacks in 2022 have been busts. You had Pickett in the first round, and there are a bunch of other guys that just have not gotten it done. And it just shows you have to have good scouting, and it's going to be interesting as we move closer to the draft, and everybody's getting excited about where there's teams picking and everything and all that. But hopefully these GMs are doing their homework and their scouting departments. But they have to listen to each other. I've talked to a lot of guys over the years, and they said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe the fight that was going on in the draft room." This guy wanted that guy, the other guy wanted this guy, and then the owner comes in with final say, and he picks somebody that nobody wants. So any final thoughts as we start moving towards the draft?
I think it's going to be interesting to see the stories that come out, how some of these teams fall off of certain players because how they interviewed. It's the interview process that's coming up right now. And there's going to be 1 or 2 players that are going to fall. Like back in the day, it was like, oh, we found out Warren Sapp smoked weed or something like that. And there's going to be some certain things that come down over the next 2 weeks that's going to probably make some Hall of Famer fall 10 to 20 spots. But it's just to find out who the guys that are going to fall down.
Yeah, and it's always, I say, looking for the warts this time of season. And you talk about that pick. Warren Sapp gets taken. The Eagles take Mike Mamula, instead of Warren Sapp. Warren Sapp goes on for the Bucs to have a Hall of Fame career, and it's just like, wow, But like I said, hindsight's 20/20, and you just never know. This is the interview process, and everybody out there, just remember when you went for your first job out there, how green you were. So another great week on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South Network. Thanks to Angel for doing the production. We also had Kevin Midget do a great job talking about a variety of topics. I was like hitting all around the league, and he's always ready. So definitely keep coming back for us for a lot of information. We'll get you ready for the draft, and we'll start talking about some team needs. Talk to you later.